What is up, everyone? Let's get into this. Remember, if you like this broadcast, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. And if you enjoy it, make sure you share it with your friends so that way we grow the channel. If you're not following me on Twitter, head over to Twitter, or X as it's now called, and follow me there. So you can check out my profile here. It's just Chandler SAF and give me a follow. Otherwise, let's get this party started. So the first thing I wanted to look at today was the market cap index over on the crypto side. So in the previous broadcast, you've noticed that we were kind of in the green. We were right here tipping to the green. Now notice we've moved back a lot more. So we're going from a little more greedy to a little more neutral because the market's basically been in sort of a sideways downtrend for a while. When we look at where everything's at, we basically were 1% down on Bitcoin the last 7 days. So it hasn't been anything crazy. XRP had a massive move, so it makes sense that it would be consolidating. When we look at Dogecoin, because it got tagged up with Twitter and a bunch of new things, or whatever it's called, X now, Doge has been up a little bit, and we'll go over these quite a bit more later. Looking at a lot of SHIB meme coins are kind of popping. Whenever Doge pops, SHIB pops, so you can pay attention to that. Overall, though, market's kind of just sideways. Some alts are popping. There's some decent plays in there, so some stuff to pay attention to. But where we're at in terms of the overall market, typically crypto on the good days will follow. On the good and the bad days, we'll follow the NASDAQ. So when we look at NASDAQ, let me turn off this VWAP. But when we look at the NASDAQ over on the weekly for this week, it was good. Last week was a down week. This week, we pumped. We even had a little correction when the Bank of Japan kind of rug pulled the entire market yesterday, but still came out on top. Same thing with SPX, SPY. So it's been a pretty good week. You can see post-trading SPY sitting at 457.02, so it's fairly close, but we basically came back from yesterday, 452, and pushed all the way back up. So that's a good sign. The market's in a good place. When we look at a lot of the stocks that I think looked really good today, we have BABA finally moving. So I had some calls in BABA. We finally pushed through a lot of this junk we've been stuck in, and now we're up in this $100 zone. So now it's like this $100 has been a pretty good pocket. I had a call that I sold today, but this is going to be the new pocket. So the goal is to push past this, but it's been a pretty good stock to play around in. The other thing that's looked pretty good, when we look down here at some of the crypto stocks, we've got Marathon. These guys are looking pretty good over the course of the week. We had a down week, and they're starting to go up. The problem with these is as Bitcoin becomes less and less, more and more volatile and less to the upside, these things feel the wrath just as bad. So something to pay attention to on those. MicroStrategy is another one that had a down week, sort of a good week, but not really. It's because crypto and Bitcoin can't really decide what it wants to do right now. So stuff to pay attention to on that. The other things that I think are looking decent as we come down. I watched Marathon. It had a great week. I kind of started to map it out down here in 118. Now we're at the 132 zone. So that was a good pull. It looks like it's finally pushing through a lot of this chop. So that way it can head into new all-time highs, which would be interesting. All right, so let's get into the crypto game. And what do I think for next week? It seems like we're overall bullish in stocks on this side. When we look at SPY, we're starting to, on the weekly, we're obviously pretty extended, but there's no major like bad things going on. Looks like we got 466 resistance, then we've got 474, then we've got all-time highs to pull. NASDAQ, similar situation. We're coming up on testing a lot of these previous highs. So right here, we push past this, or we're trying to push past this right now, then we move up. So overall, nothing horrible. If we even come and look at the indexes on the daily, you got a sorted divergence on the daily. You can kind of see it here, which with how strong, maybe not. Maybe it's, who knows? It's close. I guess it's kind of there because it's on the awesome oscillator down here too. So that could play out over the course of a day and cause a decent dump. We did have one that happened, and maybe that's exactly what happened. We got dumped on, but we'll see how that plays out. I don't think it's too bad on the 3 days, so it's not showing up on the, I guess it is a little bit. So we can see it on the 3 days, just not on the AO yet. So something to pay attention to. There could be a correction there. If there's a correction, at some point on the NASDAQ, then it'll translate over to crypto. So let's take a look at crypto. When we look at Bitcoin dominance, it's coming down. So it's kind of been tanking. We peaked up here in like the 52% zone, and now it's falling through this little support, which means that alts are starting to become more powerful. Obviously, alts have been pumping. So that's why. When we look at Bitcoin, looking at this chart, BTC has basically been ranging. It's been trying to come back up and push past this zone that we're stuck in now. So we've got a little bit of a range here established, which is like, and I've been talking about this in the Dude server, but we're stuck just below this like 30,355 zone. Like we can't really get past it. We've been stuck every single time we get above it. So even on the 4 hour, we'll push through, and then we get rejected right back down. Push through, we're getting rejected right now. So it's kind of trying to decide which direction it wants to go. For me, kind of seems like we want to go to the downside. There's some support and stuff like that, but when we look at the 4 hour chart, we've gone below the 50 on the RSI. We had a decent bounce here, but it didn't do anything for us. We got rejected anyway off the 50, came back down, double bottomed, came back. It looks like we're getting rejected off the 50 again. So that's going to push us right back down, which is going to turn into a problem down the line if that keeps happening, because obviously we're going to keep getting rejected and going lower and lower. When we look at the daily, it's sort of a similar story. Daily fell through, kind of started tumbling. We tried to come back and push to the above the 50, got rejected, went straight down. So daily looks fairly bearish in terms of the direction we're headed. So doesn't look as good in that direction either. When we look at the 3-day, we are sort of in the same territory. So we close the 3-day in 1 day. But if we close that, that's going to put us near this 50, and that's going to be a pretty pivotable testing zone. So that's going to put us in a place where we decide, do we bounce and drive, or do we fall straight through? Right now, with the momentum of how Bitcoin looks in the market, seems like we're probably going to fall straight through. So just something to pay attention to. Same thing coming up on the weekly. We're looking like we want to test more lows. So as the weekly, we had a nice green trend on the weekly. Now we're starting to turn red. So as we move through here, we're peeling back over, we're coming through here, and we're going to get closer to testing that. So we'll kind of see where it goes. Not overly great news in terms of how it looks. In my opinion, I think we start heading towards these EMA bands that are way down here. One of my targets for us to push to is like, I think we're going to go back down and retest that 28.851 zone. And I wouldn't be surprised to see us come back and test the 28.4, 28.2 zone. Let me see where I drew that line. So we have this line here. So come back over and peek down and come back and test this, like it's like 28.6 now, even 28.3, somewhere in this zone would be the first place to test. If we lose that, that pushes us down to the 27.8 zone, hopefully that's a good wick. We're starting to see a crossover, which could be bullish for us, but first we need to be able to wick off of it. Sometimes those wicks give us the strength to actually create a decent drive. Looking at the 3-day, we're sitting just above this EMA band. The problem with this is if we lose this, that puts us on a trajectory straight to the 28.2 zone and then straight down probably to 27.6 zone if we fall through that. There could, in what I'm kind of looking at, is for us to hit this and maybe have a relief bounce finally, because if you look at this zone, this little line we've created, we hit and drive, hit the top of the channel, hit, drive. Now maybe hopefully at some point we hit and use that to drive and push us up to like the 34,000 zone. If what could happen though is we hit, we come straight through, and then we wick off of these EMA bands, which gives us the push and drive back up. So it's like fall, come straight through, wick. So something like that could potentially happen as long as we hold that. But what we want to look for here is losing this number here. So it's like 29,146 or 169-ish, this zone right here. If we lose that on the 3-day, then that's probably a pretty big problem. And then we're going to spend the next 3 days retesting it, and then we'll probably dump. If we close above it, we're just going to continue going sideways and do this for a while. We may even come back up and retest this again and then push down. So that'll be something to pay attention to and to look out for in terms of kind of the long term of where we're headed. Or not long term, I guess that's a short term plan. But when you look at the daily, same thing happened here. If you notice, we went above it, then we fell through it, wicked back up, and then next daily we kind of fell through again. Then we retested, finally lost it. And now we push straight back down to this band. And that's where we're at now. And we're below this one. So the bad news here is if we keep closing below this, we're probably going to close 3-day below that. And then that pushes us down to this zone that I was just talking about where this band is sitting. So that's kind of what I would expect for Bitcoin. Ethereum's probably in a similar situation. On the daily, we're below the red. We're barely above this. If we lose that, that puts ETH down to a trajectory towards like 1843, 1839-ish at that zone. So that's something to look out for and pay attention to. It kind of shows up on the weekly and the 3-day as well. So we're just above this red. If we lose that 1865 zone, then that pushes us back down what I was just talking about. When you look at these as well, where the 3-day on ETH is basically triple topped here. Now it's pushing down. We're about to test this 50 EMA or this 50 RSI zone. If we lose that, then we keep dumping down. So that's what we're looking for there. Some of the alts that we're looking at, Sol has been a pretty good performer, but when we look at Sol, it looks good, but we just need Bitcoin to behave. Otherwise, it just can't, nothing can do anything. Where we're getting rejected on Sol right now is this 2667 zone. And then support is this 2197 zone. So typically what'll happen is we'll retest this, we'll push down, probably wick off this and keep going. Unless Bitcoin catastrophically collapses, then this will too. So that's what I would pay attention to on Sol. This is like 2190, maybe even higher, 22, 23-ish is a pretty hot buy zone right now for Sol. And then the sell short zone's like 2767. Let me see if there's any questions so far. Let me know if you have questions. If you're in the chat and you have questions, drop those down below. Another one that's been performing decently well is Optimism. So when we look at the 3-day, it came up, it tried to test. Now it's coming back through to retest this. If it falls through, then we get a little bearish. If it pushes through up and bounces, then we obviously end up bullish. So something to pay attention to there. We're basically wicking off of this EMA band, and then we're not able to get support here. If we can push and get support, that pushes us up to like the 160 zone. In terms of some of the other, let's look at Doge. Someone asked about Doge. It's kind of sitting in the same zone. It hasn't really done anything. Doge had a great wick off of these bands and then pushed straight through. Now it's kind of stuck. This is a pretty significant resistance zone. If it can close a 3-day above this and bounce, it'll push back up and test this 0.08 zone. If it can clear that, probably puts us on a trajectory around like 10 cents for Doge or something like that, but it's basically been stuck forever. So something to pay attention to. Another one to look at that someone asked me was ARB. So ARB doesn't look great. It kind of peaked here. Now it's starting to push back down towards the 50 RSI on the 3-day, which isn't the best news in the world. If it bounces, it's great news. But looking at what's happened on the daily, it rejected and came up. It's going to reject, and we're going to see what happens. But ultimately, it doesn't look like it's the best thing in the world. One I talked about last time was Ape. I think Ape, on the daily, we came back up. We did test the 50. We got rejected. So now it's coming back into this reaccumulation zone, probably hit 182, and then it'll test it again. But the good news about Ape is, let's see on the weekly. So looking at Ape, it's premature, I think, for a hot buy, but it looks like it wants to push that because we've got kind of a 1, 2, almost a triple div on the Awesome Oscillator. But what's happening here is we're getting rejected off of the 50 RSI. So it's preventing us to be able to push. If it does push above this like $2.04 zone, then that puts us on trajectory to come back up and test 227. So that's kind of what I would expect for that. Outside of that, I think ultimately the market is headed toward, it seems like we want more downside action. I think we need to at least get down to the 28.2 zone. before we can actually make any sort of significant moves or anything that's going to allow us to push. So that's what I would expect. I would expect us to continuously on the daily try to clear this zone at 29,391-ish. Seems to be where we keep getting shut down, 29,356. So if we can close a daily above that and then confirm another daily above it, that pushes us to come back up and test 29.7. If we keep closing below this though, then that sends us on a fast trajectory right down to this 28.4 zone where I was talking about previously. So that's what to look out for. Basically, if Bitcoin moves, the market moves. If Bitcoin dumps, the market dumps. So that's what we want to watch. ETH, same story. We're getting rejected here. We're sort of above right here on 1871. We lose that. That pushes us down to 1840. And then we can potentially see the 1700s. So let me see if there's any questions. Yeah, so just checked ARB. It doesn't look great. Like I said, ARB is getting rejected off of right here. If we keep closing below this, it pushes us down, which we already did. So now we're down here at 117. We're barely above it. If we can close a couple dailies above it, then it probably has another shot to come back up and test 119. But when we look at the RSI down here, we tested here, got rejected. So now we're probably going to come back up and test. We are moving into the negative in the awesome oscillator. So not great on the daily. Even looking at the 4 hour, it's somewhat trying to do a recovery. It tested here, got rejected, which was essentially bottomed out, came back up to test the 50, got rejected. Now it's coming back up to test again. So it's going to be a pretty pivotal joint moment when it comes back up to test this zone, whether or not it pushes or it actually comes back up and dumps and probably comes back and tests this zone like 113, 114, and then ultimately maybe even lower like the 104. So that's what I would look out for. All right, so based on that, I think that's kind of what we can look out for the market. When I'm looking at different coins and stuff like that, I kind of just go and look at where the momentum is. If there's no momentum on it, I'm not going to play it. If there is, then we'll play it a little bit. But overall, it seems like the market wants to be bullish. We've got good movement on stocks. If only crypto would follow how strong stocks have been. I mean, Apple is on this beautiful trend line here. Every time it touches it, it drives and bounces. So if Apple comes back and touches this trend line again, and boom, it drives. Same thing with like a lot of these coin or these stocks are doing a similar thing. They're running off these trend lines and it's been basically up only. So hopefully we can get crypto to that zone and get Bitcoin to finally start moving. So Bitcoin looks like the freaking Google chart because the stocks are crushing it in comparison to where Bitcoin is like even PayPal. We're just waiting for it to get past this like 74, 75 zone. And then it's bullish. And then it pushes up to the like 81s and then the 105s. BABA, it was stuck right here in the middle for a long time. And now BABA's finally breaking through. We look at the daily. Seems like it was a bunch of junk right here from like 96 to like 91 to maybe even 98. Now it finally pushed through and it's established some support. So now if we come through and we see a daily close above this, which it already wants to, it's already at 195 in after hours trading, then we're probably going to see this thing push to like, I put 102 here, and then it could potentially push itself back up to like 110, 109.89, maybe even higher. So a lot of things are looking pretty good in terms of the stock market. NIO is another one, finally pushing, had a down day yesterday, and then it pushed up. A lot of things had a down day yesterday. But overall, it's my outlook. Let me know if there's any questions. And if you like the stream, make sure you like and subscribe. But that's it. I hope you all have a great day, and I